Ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoy my video, please click the like button and share the video. It is the only way the YouTube algorithms really notices me. I will be very grateful to you. The House of Dead Cries. Scary story published by Scare Fiction. Read for you by Scare Fiction. Chapter 1. The Move. Anna and Mark Parker pulled into the overgrown driveway of the old mansion, the autumn sun casting long shadows over the dilapidated structure. The house stood alone on the edge of a dense forest in a secluded part of New England, a far cry from their bustling life in Boston. Mark killed the engine, and the couple sat in silence for a moment, taking in their new home. "Can you believe this place?" Mark finally said, his voice a mix of awe and excitement. "All ours." Anna nodded, her eyes scanning the grand yet decaying facade. "It's like something out of a Gothic novel," she murmured, her artistic mind already envisioning the possibilities. She was desperate for a fresh start after the accident that had left her emotionally scarred, and this house felt like the perfect canvas. They stepped out of the car, the crisp air filled with the scent of pine and decay. Mark unlocked the massive front door with an old, rusty key. It creaked open, revealing a dark foyer lined with peeling wallpaper and a grand staircase that spiraled into shadow. "Welcome home," Mark said with a grin, flipping the light switch to no effect. "Guess we'll be doing more than just redecorating." Anna laughed softly, though the sound seemed swallowed by the oppressive silence. She wandered into the parlor, her footsteps echoing on the wooden floor. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light filtering through dirty windows, and the air was thick with neglect. "This place has potential," she said, more to convince herself than Mark. Her eyes fell on a broken doll in the corner, its porcelain face cracked and eyes blank. She shivered and turned away, blaming the chill on the drafty room. Mark, ever the pragmatist, was already mapping out renovations in his mind. "We'll start with the essentials," he said, examining the blueprints he found on a dusty desk. The papers were old and yellowed, showing a complex layout with numerous rooms and hidden passages. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a series of small, mysterious chambers. Anna joined him, curiosity piqued. "Secret rooms? That's intriguing," she said, trying to ignore the unease creeping up her spine. She swore she heard faint crying, but when she listened closer, there was only silence. They spent the afternoon exploring the house, each room revealing a new layer of its eerie charm. An unsettling feeling grew with each creaking floorboard and whispering draft. The house seemed to be watching them, waiting. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows through the cracked windows, Anna and Mark stood in what would be her studio. The room was large and filled with potential, yet the broken doll in the corner seemed to watch them with lifeless eyes. "This is it," Anna said, forcing a smile. "Our new beginning." Mark squeezed her hand. "Together, we can make this place our own." But as they turned to leave, the faint sound of crying echoed through the halls, sending a chill down Anna's spine. She shook her head, dismissing it as her imagination. Yet deep down, a sense of foreboding settled over her heart. This house had secrets, and they were just beginning to uncover them. Chapter 2. Unsettling Discoveries. The next morning, the Parker household was buzzing with activity. Mark donned his work gloves and set to clearing out the debris in the foyer, while Anna, armed with a paintbrush and palette, eagerly began setting up her studio. The broken doll still sat in the corner, a silent reminder of the house's eerie ambience, but Anna tried to ignore it. As the renovations kicked off, strange occurrences began almost immediately. It started with small things, doors creaking open on their own, cold drafts that seemed to come from nowhere, and the ever-present whispers in the night. Mark attributed it all to the house's age. Old houses make noises, Anna. It's just settling. But Anna wasn't so sure. One afternoon, while painting, she saw shadows moving across the walls, though there was no one there. The shadows twisted and elongated, forming shapes that seemed almost human. She put down her brush, her heart pounding, and decided to take a break. Exploring the house further, she stumbled upon a small, dusty attic. The narrow staircase creaked under her weight, and the air was thick with the scent of mold and age. In one corner, partially hidden beneath a pile of old newspapers, she found an old, leather-bound diary. Its pages were yellowed and fragile, filled with spidery handwriting. She took the diary to her studio and began to read. The entries were from a woman named Eliza, who had lived in the house a century ago. Eliza wrote of her growing fear of ghostly cries and moving shadows, and of a malevolent presence that seemed to inhabit the house. "Beware the house," one entry read. "It feeds on sorrow and fear." That night, Anna told Mark about her discovery, her voice trembling. "Mark, this diary, it's filled with warnings about the house. Eliza, the woman who wrote it, she experienced the same things we are." Mark frowned, barely looking up from the blueprints spread out on the table. "Anna, it's just an old diary. People used to believe in all sorts of superstitions. We need to focus on the renovations." "But Mark, what if there's something more to it?" Anna's frustration and fear were palpable. Mark sighed, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're stressed. This house, the move, everything. It's getting to you. Let's focus on fixing this place up. It'll get better, I promise." As days passed, the strange occurrences escalated. Anna's visions became more vivid, more disturbing. She saw faces in the shadows, heard ghostly cries echoing through the halls, and felt an overwhelming sense of dread whenever she was alone. Mark, however, remained skeptical, his rational mind refusing to acknowledge the unexplainable events. He threw himself into the practicalities of renovation, finding solace in the tangible work of fixing the house's structure and uncovering hidden rooms. The tension between them grew. Anna felt increasingly isolated, her fears dismissed by the one person she needed most. Mark's dismissal of her concerns only deepened her sense of dread and loneliness. One evening, as Anna stood in her studio, the broken doll's eyes seemed to follow her every move. The whispers grew louder, almost taunting her. She clutched the diary to her chest, feeling the weight of Eliza's warnings. The house was watching, waiting, and Anna feared they had only begun to uncover its darkest secrets. Chapter 3: The Diary's Secrets. Anna sat in her studio, the old diary open on her lap. She flipped through its fragile pages, each entry revealing more about the house's sinister past. Eliza's writing grew increasingly frantic, her descriptions painting a picture of despair. The house had witnessed countless tragedies, a family driven mad, a child disappearing without a trace, and an artist who, like Anna, sought inspiration but found only terror. The more Anna read, the more the house's oppressive atmosphere weighed on her. She felt a connection to Eliza, a woman who had once stood in the same place, faced the same fears. But unlike Eliza, Anna was determined to uncover the truth before it consumed her. As if on cue, the air grew colder, and the familiar sound of ghostly cries echoed through the halls. Anna's heart raced as she followed the noise, her breath visible in the icy air. She turned a corner and gasped. A ghostly figure stood at the end of the hallway, its face twisted in sorrow. Anna blinked, and it was gone, leaving her shaken. Downstairs, Mark was busy examining the structural integrity of the house. He had begun to experience minor, unsettling events, a flickering light, a cold draft, a whisper in the dark. but he dismissed them as old house quirks. His rational mind clung to logical explanations, further frustrating Anna. It's just the wind, Anna. Or maybe mice. Old houses have their quirks. Anna's frustration mounted. Mark, this isn't just the wind. I saw something, and it's getting worse. You have to believe me. Mark sighed, rubbing his temples. I know you're scared, but there has to be a reasonable explanation. Let's focus on the renovations. Maybe it'll help take your mind off things. Determined to prove that something was truly wrong, Anna spent her days with the diary, piecing together the house's history. One evening, as she read about Eliza's final days, she heard Mark's voice calling her from the basement. His tone was uncharacteristically tense. Anna, come down here. You need to see this. She hurried downstairs to find Mark standing before a false wall he had discovered. Behind it lay a hidden room, untouched for decades. Dusty furniture cluttered the space, and an eerie collection of antique toys and portraits adorned the walls. Each toy was positioned as if mid-play, yet their lifeless eyes seemed to follow her every move. Mark, for once, looked genuinely unsettled. I don't remember seeing this on the blueprints, he muttered, more to himself than to Anna. She picked up a doll, its porcelain face cracked. The same sense of dread that had filled Eliza's diary entries now washed over her. Mark, this room, it's wrong. Can't you feel it? For the first time, doubt flickered in Mark's eyes. Maybe there's more to this house than we thought. The hidden room's discovery marked a turning point. The hauntings escalated, and the cries grew louder, more insistent. Ghostly apparitions appeared more frequently, their sorrowful eyes filled with a desperate plea for release. Anna and Mark could no longer ignore the truth. The house was haunted by the tormented spirits of its past. As they stood in the hidden room, surrounded by relics of forgotten lives, Anna felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had to uncover the house's secrets and put the restless spirits to peace. But the question remained, at what cost? The house had claimed many before them, and it wasn't done yet. Chapter 4: Unraveling Sanity. Anna's sleep was haunted by vivid nightmares, each one more terrifying than the last. The faces of the house's tormented spirits followed her into her dreams, their cries echoing in her mind. As the days passed, her mental state began to fray. She found herself jumping at shadows, her heart racing at every unexplained sound. The diary's entries seemed to blur with her own thoughts, and she began to fear she was succumbing to the same madness that had plagued Eliza. One evening, as she tried to paint in her studio, the familiar cold swept through the room. She glanced at the broken doll in the corner. Its eyes seemed to glisten with malice. Suddenly, the shadows on the walls began to move, twisting into ghastly shapes. Anna dropped her brush, backing away in terror. "Mark!" she screamed, but her voice felt swallowed by the oppressive silence. Mark rushed in, finding Anna huddled in the corner, her eyes wide with fear. He had been wrestling with his own unease, but seeing Anna in such a state shattered his skepticism. "What happened?" he asked, his voice tinged with genuine concern. Anna pointed a trembling finger at the walls. The shadows, they were moving. I saw them. Mark looked around, seeing nothing but the flickering light of the lamp. He wanted to dismiss it, but something in Anna's eyes made him hesitate. "Maybe it's just the light playing tricks," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. That night, as Mark worked late in the basement, he experienced something that shook his rational mind. The temperature dropped suddenly, and a heavy silence filled the room. As he turned, he saw a ghostly figure standing at the far end of the basement, its eyes hollow and face twisted in sorrow. Tools flew off the shelves, clattering to the ground. Mark's heart pounded as the apparition moved closer, and then Just as suddenly as it appeared, it vanished. Mark stumbled upstairs, his face pale. "Anna, I saw something down there. I can't explain it." Anna's eyes filled with both relief and fear. "You believe me now?" Their newfound mutual fear tested their relationship. Arguments erupted over the smallest things, Anna's mounting terror clashing with Mark's desperate attempts to cling to logic. Both began to experience vivid nightmares, each one filled with the house's dark history. Determined to find answers, Anna scoured the diary and searched the house for more clues. She found hidden notes, cryptic messages that hinted at a ritual or curse tied to the house's foundation. Each discovery deepened the mystery and her sense of dread. One night, as she deciphered a particularly chilling entry, the temperature in the room plummeted. An aggressive spirit manifested before her, its form a twisted mass of shadows and anguish. It lunged at Anna, who screamed in terror, knocking over her easel and scattering her paints. Mark burst into the room, just in time to see the spirit's ghastly visage. He grabbed Anna, pulling her away as the entity raged, its cries filling the room with a bone-chilling resonance. "We need to figure out how to stop this," Mark said, his voice resolute despite the fear in his eyes. Anna nodded, clutching the diary tightly. "We have to break the curse, or it will destroy us too." As they faced the malevolent spirit together, their bond strengthened in the face of unimaginable horror. The house had claimed many before them, but Anna and Mark were determined to uncover its secrets and find a way to free themselves from its deadly grip. Chapter 5: The House's History. Anna and Mark sat in the dim light of the local library, surrounded by stacks of old newspapers and town records. The musty smell of aged paper filled the air as they pored over articles and documents, piecing together the tragic history of their home. Each revelation sent chills down their spines, deepening their resolve to uncover the truth. The first major discovery came from a series of old newspaper clippings. "Look at this," Anna said, her voice barely above a whisper. She handed Mark a faded article detailing the mysterious disappearance of a young girl in the 1920s. The girl had vanished without a trace, and her family, driven to madness by grief, had met untimely ends. "That's not all," Mark replied, holding up another article from the 1950s. It recounted the death of a local artist who had bought the house, only to be found dead in his studio, surrounded by disturbing paintings that seemed to depict ghostly figures. This house has a pattern of driving its occupants to madness or worse. Their search led them to the town's oral histories, collected and preserved by the local historical society. An elderly librarian, intrigued by their quest, shared tales passed down through generations. "They say the land the house stands on is cursed, built over an old asylum or burial ground. The spirits there never rested." Back at the house, Anna's obsession with the diary grew. She spent hours unraveling its secrets, each entry pulling her deeper into the past. One chilling passage described a ritual meant to contain the malevolent spirits, a ritual that had failed spectacularly, dooming future residents. As she read, the house seemed to close in on her. Shadows moved with intent, whispers filled the air, and the once faint cries now screamed in her ears. She felt the spirits' anger, their desire for release, and their malevolent energy seeping into her soul. Mark, meanwhile, could no longer deny the supernatural events. One night, as he worked in the basement, he stumbled upon architectural plans hidden behind a false wall. The blueprints were covered in strange symbols, unlike anything he had seen before. Mark traced them with shaking hands, feeling an inexplicable dread. "These symbols," he said to Anna later, showing her the documents. They're not just designs. They're part of the house's foundation, some kind of binding or containment. Anna's eyes widened with recognition. It's connected to the ritual Eliza wrote about. The symbols are meant to keep the spirits trapped. But something went wrong. Mark nodded, his fear palpable. We need to understand these symbols and the ritual if we're going to survive. This house, it's not just haunted. It's a prison for something far worse. Their relationships strained under the weight of their discoveries. As they argued more frequently, stress and fear driving them apart. Both were haunted by nightmares, visions of the house's tragic past, merging with their own reality. With each step deeper into the house's history, Anna and Mark knew they were racing against time. The spirits grew more restless, their hauntings more violent. The house demanded a resolution, and Anna and Mark had no choice but to confront its malevolent force head-on. As they prepared to face the darkness together, their bond was tested like never before. They realized that only by uncovering the full extent of the house's secrets and performing the failed ritual correctly could they hope to free themselves and the spirits trapped within. Chapter 6: Descent in Darkness. The house seemed to come alive with malevolence, its walls pulsing with dark energy. The hauntings reached a fever pitch, with every corner of the mansion brimming with terror. As Anna and Mark wandered the house, searching for more clues, the walls began to bleed, thick, crimson streams running down in sickening rivulets. "Anna!" Mark shouted, but his voice was swallowed by a cacophony of ghostly screams. Ghostly figures emerged from the shadows, their faces contorted in agony, their mouths wide open in silent screams. They reached out with translucent hands, their touch icy and suffocating. The house's malevolence surged, and the couple found themselves separated, each facing their own personal nightmares. Anna stumbled into a room that twisted and shifted around her. The air grew heavy with the scent of decay, and her surroundings morphed into a twisted reflection of her past trauma. She saw herself at her darkest moments, her fears manifesting as grotesque apparitions. "No," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "This isn't real." But the visions persisted, forcing her to relive the pain she had buried deep within. Shadows whispered her failures, her insecurities, her deepest fears. She felt herself unraveling, her sanity slipping away. Meanwhile, Mark found himself in a room that seemed to pulse with his unresolved childhood issues. His father's stern voice echoed through the air, belittling him, reminding him of his failures. Mark clenched his fists, fighting back tears. "I'm not a child anymore," he muttered, but the memories were relentless. The room filled with manifestations of his childhood fears, dark, looming figures that represented his sense of inadequacy and guilt. Forced to confront these phantoms, Mark felt his resolve weaken. He had always relied on logic, on reason, but here, those tools were useless. Desperation grew as the couple tried to escape the house. Every door they opened led back into the same rooms. Windows that once offered glimpses of the outside world now showed only darkness. The house had them in its grip, and it wasn't letting go. Panic set in as they realized the truth. They were trapped. Anna, driven by a mix of fear and determination, continued to search for answers. She discovered a hidden compartment behind a loose brick in the fireplace, revealing the final piece of Eliza's diary. The pages trembled in her hands as she read the chilling revelation. The house's malevolence was bound by a ritual, one that required a personal sacrifice. "The key to breaking the curse," she whispered, "is an artifact hidden within the house and a ritual involving a personal sacrifice." She felt a cold dread settle over her. The artifact was a small, ornate box that had belonged to the original owner of the house, a deranged doctor who had performed unspeakable acts in the asylum. Mark found her, his face pale and drawn. "Anna, we need to do this together. Whatever it takes, we need to end this." Their hope of escaping the house faded as they realized the true cost of their freedom. The ritual demanded a sacrifice of something deeply personal, something tied to their deepest fears and traumas. As they prepared to face the ultimate challenge, they knew that only by confronting their darkest selves could they hope to break the curse and free the spirits trapped within the house. Together, they braced themselves for the final confrontation, determined to end the house's reign of terror once and for all. Chapter 7. Confronting the Evil. Anna and Mark stood in the dimly lit living room, the air thick with anticipation and fear. The final pages of Eliza's diary lay open on the table, detailing the steps needed to break the house's curse. Anna clutched the ornate box, the key to their ritual, her fingers trembling. "We need to do this now," Mark said, his voice steady but his eyes betraying his fear. "Before the house tries to stop us." They gathered the necessary items, candles, the diary, and personal mementos representing their deepest fears and traumas. Mark brought an old toy soldier, a reminder of his father's harsh expectations. Anna carried a sketch of a broken family, symbolizing her unresolved guilt and loss. Before starting, they shared a moment of vulnerability. "Mark," Anna whispered, "I'm scared, but I believe in us." Mark took her hand, his grip firm. "We've faced so much together. We can do this. We have to." With renewed resolve, they began the ritual. The room darkened further, shadows creeping along the walls. They lit the candles, the flickering flames casting eerie shapes. As they chanted the incantation from the diary, the air grew cold, and the house seemed to come alive with rage. Ghostly figures materialized, their forms twisted and anguished. Objects flew off shelves, crashing against the walls. A powerful wind swept through the room, threatening to extinguish the candles. Anna and Mark pressed on, their voices rising above the chaos. The house fought back with all its malevolent force. Anna was flung against a wall, but she pulled herself up, eyes blazing with determination. Mark struggled to keep the candles lit, his hands shaking. "We can't stop now," he shouted over the din. The ritual demanded a personal sacrifice, something deeply tied to their fears. Anna stepped forward, holding the sketch of her broken family. She felt a wrenching pain as she tore it in half, symbolizing her release from the guilt she had carried for so long. Mark, with trembling hands, placed the toy soldier into the fire, watching as it melted away. The act was a final severance from his father's shadow, an acceptance of his own worth. The air crackled with energy as the house's malevolent spirit manifested, a grotesque figure of darkness and malice. It lunged at them, its screams filling the room. Anna and Mark stood their ground, continuing the incantation with renewed fervor. The spirit's fury grew, but so did their resolve. The house shook violently, the walls cracking and groaning. The spirit's form flickered, its power waning. With one final, deafening scream, it dissolved into nothingness. The candles flickered out, and the room fell silent. Anna and Mark stood breathless, their hearts pounding. They had done it. The malevolent force that had plagued the house for generations was gone. Exhausted, they embraced, tears streaming down their faces. "It's over," Anna whispered, her voice filled with relief and disbelief. Mark nodded, holding her close. "We did it, together." As dawn broke, the oppressive atmosphere lifted, replaced by a serene calm. The house, once a place of terror, now felt like just a house. Anna and Mark knew they had not only freed the trapped spirits, but also themselves from their pasts. They had faced their deepest fears and emerged stronger, their bond unbreakable. Together, they stepped outside, the morning light bathing them in warmth. They had confronted the evil and won, ready to start anew, free from the house's dark shadow. Chapter 8: Resolution and Aftermath. The first light of dawn crept through the shattered windows, casting a gentle glow over the once terrifying house. Anna and Mark stood in the center of the living room, their breaths heavy with exhaustion and relief. The oppressive atmosphere had lifted, replaced by an almost palpable sense of peace. The ritual had worked, the malevolent spirit was banished, and the house's curse was broken. "We did it," Anna whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of disbelief and joy. Mark nodded, pulling her into a tight embrace. "We did, together." The couple walked through the house, now eerily quiet and still. The ghostly figures and poltergeist activity were gone, leaving behind only the echoes of their memories. They felt the weight of the past lifting from their shoulders, the spirits finally at rest. In the kitchen, they sat at the worn wooden table, hands clasped. "This house," Anna said, her eyes scanning the room, "it changed us. Forced us to face things we'd buried deep." Mark squeezed her hand. "We've grown stronger. Together, we've faced our worst fears and come out the other side." They spoke of the nightmares that had haunted them, the personal demons they had confronted. Anna's guilt over her past and Mark's struggles with his father's shadow had been exorcised along with the house's malevolence. They were different now, stronger, more connected. "What do we do next?" Anna asked, her voice soft. Mark took a deep breath, looking around the house. "We have two choices: stay and rebuild, or leave and start fresh somewhere else." Anna thought for a moment, then smiled. "This house, despite everything, has become part of our story. I think we should stay, rebuild it together, make it a place of peace." Mark smiled back, nodding. "I agree. We can turn this place into something new, something positive. Our sanctuary." They made plans for the future, discussing renovations and new beginnings. The house, once a place of horror, would become a symbol of their resilience and love. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. As the day turned to evening, Anna and Mark stood at the front door, looking out over the property. Hand in hand, they stepped outside, feeling the warmth of the sun on their faces. The air was fresh, filled with the promise of new beginnings. They walked away from the house, their steps in sync, their hearts light. Behind them, the house stood silent, a relic of past horrors, now at peace. As they reached the edge of the property, Anna glanced back one last time. For a moment, she thought she saw a figure in the window, a faint, ethereal presence. She blinked, and it was gone. A shiver ran down her spine, a subtle reminder of the house's past. But she turned back to Mark, her resolve firm. They had faced the darkness together and emerged stronger. Anna and Mark walking hand in hand, ready to face whatever came next. The house, now free of its curse, stood as a testament to their courage and love. And though a hint of its supernatural past lingered, they knew they could face it together.